Chapter 21, Whispers of the Lake, Part 3. The morning dawned cool and quiet over the vast lake as Candice, Jarek, and their seasoned sailor prepared to depart. The lake stretched endlessly before them, a vast sheet of still, reflective water that seemed to absorb and stretch the sky above. Candice tightened her grip on the rail of the small, sturdy boat, marveling at the smooth surface and feeling a strange mixture of peace and caution. This lake, as beautiful and calm as it appeared, was rumored to hold sudden tempests and treacherous currents that had turned back many travelers before them. "Stay sharp," the sailor muttered, casting an eye toward the sky as he checked his course one last time. "It may look calm now, but this lake is a trickster. Any moment, and it can change." Jarek glanced at Candice, nodding slightly in reassurance, but his expression was sober. The boat began to move, and the shore receded as the sailor angled them steadily out toward open waters. Candice exhaled as the shoreline drifted behind them, and an uneasy silence settled in her thoughts, filled only by the rhythmic creak of the boat and the light splashes as the water parted under them. As they moved further from the shore, the lake seemed to stretch out endlessly on all sides, with nothing but distant, jagged mountains framing the horizon. Candice realized that this journey would be longer and more intense than she'd imagined. They had embarked in the early morning, and yet, even with the sun's slow rise, the journey already felt timeless, the lake a vast, unmoving mirror of sky and water blending into one. A few hours into their crossing, the sailor gestured to a small island in the distance, faint against the horizon. "We'll stay close to these islands," he explained, pointing out the path. "The lake's not just about the storms. It's the currents. They're not visible to the eye, but I've seen strong vessels pulled down by those unseen hands." His expression darkened as he spoke, his hand gripping the tiller tightly, and Candice could see the depth of his wariness. Even if a storm's brewing, those islands offer safe stops. Better to wait it out on solid ground. They passed by the first of these islands, low and rocky with patches of dense vegetation. The sailor skillfully navigated closer, occasionally glancing over at Candice and Jarek with a hint of suspicion. Jarek gave the man a nod of appreciation, though he kept mostly to himself, eyes fixed on the ever-stretching water ahead. "What do you know of this lake?" Candice asked Jarek as they traveled. She'd wanted to ask him earlier, but only now felt the time was right. He gave a faint smile, looking away toward the endless horizon. "I've been across it a few times," he said, his voice soft yet reflective. "Every time feels like the first. It's different, this place. Like it has moods, if that makes any sense." The sailor grunted in agreement. "Moods, indeed," he muttered. "Every sailor worth his salt respects this lake. A calm morning can turn faster than you'd think." The hours passed, the boat's rhythm steady as they glided forward. Gradually, Candice noticed the sky darkening slightly, a gray haze gathering on the horizon. The lake's surface rippled, small waves starting to disturb the mirror-like stillness. She glanced at the sailor, who was now watching the horizon with sharp attention, his hands ready to adjust their course. "We're nearing the midpoint," the sailor said. "There's a government island just ahead. Keep a safe distance. Last I heard, they didn't welcome visitors." Candice squinted ahead and spotted the dark silhouette of a distant island with a tall structure jutting into the sky. It was sharper, more industrial than the nearby islands they'd passed. The sailor had explained how he'd seen strange lights coming from it, sometimes visible even from shore. Candice glanced at Jarek, wondering what kind of facility lay hidden here, but neither seemed eager to ask. As they came closer, Candice felt a strange sense of unease. The island felt out of place, its imposing silhouette a jarring contrast to the natural serenity of the lake and the quiet, forested shores. She watched it in silence until they passed it, leaving the unnatural structure behind them. The day continued with little change, and the lake's stillness was punctuated only by the occasional call of distant birds and the gentle slap of water against the boat. The sky remained clear, though now a light breeze began to pick up, enough to ripple through Candice's hair. They were making progress, but the vast expanse of water still stretched before them with no sign of the far shore. Then, without warning, the wind intensified. The sailor's gaze snapped upward, his experienced eyes narrowing as he adjusted the sails. "Hold tight," he warned them, his voice tense. Looks like we might be in for a shift. The lake transformed quickly. The smooth, glass-like surface gave way to choppier, unpredictable waves. Candice tightened her grip as the boat began to rock more forcefully, each wave lurching them upward before crashing back down with a jolt. The sailor deftly adjusted their course, angling them toward a small island visible to their left. "Is that shelter?" Candice called out, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Aye," the sailor replied. "It's our best chance if this turns into a real storm. It's protected enough, and I've used it before. Trust me, it's better than being in open water." The waves grew stronger, and soon the sky itself seemed to close in, thick clouds rolling overhead with surprising speed. Rain began to fall, light at first but quickly intensifying until it pelted them in thick, stinging drops. The sailor guided them toward the island, Candice and Jarek holding on as the boat lurched through the swelling waves. They reached the island's shore just as the storm hit full force, the lake now a wild, churning mass of waves and wind. The sailor anchored the boat in a narrow cove, sheltered enough to keep it safe from the worst of the storm. He pulled a tarp from a compartment and threw it over them, creating a small area where they could huddle from the rain. Thunder rumbled across the lake, lightning briefly illuminating the sky and casting eerie reflections over the water. The lake had transformed into a different world, one of darkness, power, and unpredictable fury. Candice found herself grateful for the sailor's foresight, knowing that without him, they would likely have been at the mercy of the storm. They waited in silence, listening to the relentless roar of rain and the occasional gust of wind that shook their makeshift shelter. The storm raged for what felt like hours, each thunderous clap echoing across the island. Finally, as the first hints of dawn began to filter through the clouds, the storm began to weaken, the rain turning to a light drizzle. The sailor peered out, scanning the water and sky with a practiced eye. "Looks like it's past," he muttered, lifting the tarp and motioning for them to prepare to depart. As they set out again, the lake was eerily calm, the surface rippling only slightly under a light breeze. The morning light painted the water in shades of silver and gray, casting an ethereal glow over the lake's surface. Exhausted but determined, they resumed their journey, the boat moving once more into open water. Candice watched the shoreline recede as they sailed away from the island. The lake, despite its stormy outburst, had returned to a deceptively calm state. But she knew now, more than ever, that the lake's moods could change in an instant, and that it held secrets and dangers lurking just beneath its surface. The day ahead promised more miles of open water, the far shore still a distant goal. But with each stroke of the oar, Candice felt a renewed resolve, knowing that every mile brought them closer to whatever awaited them on the other side of the lake.